Welcome back to Museful, the art podcast, your art resource. I'm your host, Jazzlebeth, and today we're going to be changing things up with a controversial topic, the starving artist stupidity. I've spent a lot of time researching and fact-checking everything for this episode, and since I don't want to delay an episode this upcoming week, this topic is going to be split into two parts. This is part one. I hope you enjoy. Roll the intro. The starving artist is probably a phrase you have heard when it comes to working as a creative professional. I'm going to be debunking this outdated mindset with information about the origins of this phrase, discussing famous artists in the past, and shifting your mindset about various career paths you can take when being a creative professional nowadays. The starving artist is an outdated mindset and phrase that means you have to sacrifice your basic needs when it comes to choosing a career in art or just focusing on your artwork. This includes a lack of money, a lack of food, skipping meals, living in a shoebox studio apartment, basically stripping a person down to a roof over their head and whatever food they can afford to survive. Any funds that they would get would go straight into supplies for their artwork. It's an old cliche, and it can be very dangerous to continue to perpetuate this mindset. And the reason that I say it's dangerous is because it romanticizes this idea that you are a true artist when you give up everything in your life for your art, and at the same time plays into the narrative that this profession is so undervalued in society that there is no monetary gain from it. I loved that when I was researching this, most of the information I found was about debunking the starving artist idea. But if it's so commonly dismissed, why is it when we speak to our families and the older generation, this profession is still not taken seriously? Even though professional artists are speaking against the starving artist stupidity, it still feels like society looks at us that way. I found this amazing quote from an article written by Andy LaFrance, where she says, "Why is it entrepreneurial when two friends start a restaurant business that makes no money for the first 2 years, but foolish for an artist to do the same thing in pursuit of selling their art?" This stereotype seems like it reaches to insult creative professionals and mark us as failures and fools for trying to pursue art as a full-time job. Art is a business, and making income from it is possible. Overall, this conversation is first and foremost about money, assuming artists suffer, and this really cringy stereotype that it's for the sake of the art you just wouldn't understand. I have yet to meet an artist who aligns with this played up version of doing something random for the sake of the art. Let's talk about some history when it comes to famous starving artists. Vincent van Gogh. Vincent van Gogh is probably the number one example of the starving artist. The origin of where the phrase originated is a bit all over the place, especially when it seems it was word of mouth. It's hard to place who said it first, but the stereotype definitely started somewhere in the 19th century, between 1801 to 1900, and Van Gogh lived from 1853 to 1890, so he was in the thick of the struggle. To challenge this idea about Van Gogh, on the Van Gogh Museum website, they state he was not poor and was receiving financial support from his brother Theo. For the first few years, he got 100 to 150 francs a month. A conversion calculator roughly gives us an estimate of about $620 as of 2015, but money conversions can be tricky, especially with the value of money changing all the time. So the museum gave us an equivalent conversion. At the time, that was about 50 or 75 guilders, in any case a lot more than the 32 guilders a factory worker received back then to support a family of 7. A family of 7. So essentially, Van Gogh can be seen as someone who got money from his family. Whether you want to see it as mooching off Theo or not, Obviously, he wasn't working for an income, but being paid that much monthly from his brother provides us the assumption that his brother was wealthy enough to give out that money. Plus, painting supplies were very expensive, and Van Gogh just decided he would dedicate most of his money to supplies and have very little left for food and drinks. So, calling him a starving artist could be accurate, but only for Van Gogh specifically. And actually, it would be more correct to say that he was a very dedicated artist who went hungry because of how dedicated he was to his art. He had money to buy food and not go starving, but he chose to put it into his artwork. To use him as this poster child that all artists will starve just like him is wrong. Van Gogh chose to live that lifestyle while also dealing with other factors of his life, his mental illness being the most impactful. You could also say that he chose to focus on art as an emotional outlet while he was dealing with his mental illness. And it's interesting because as I researched to find a list of famous starving artists, Van Gogh is just the #1 result, known for being poor. Of course, several other artists were not wealthy and maybe put the same amount of dedication into their passions for art like Van Gogh, but no one else was known as starving. In fact, while I was researching, it became more about fame than it did about the money the artist gained from the art. Additionally, while I was researching, I found this Reddit post asking what sets apart famous artists from starving artists, and the responses were very interesting. The link to this conversation can be found in my description box, but mortality and death were the top replies. And then, of course, the conversation highlighted the idea that famous doesn't necessarily mean wealthy and vice versa. So when we discuss the starving artists, money and fame go together, when this topic of the starving artist is not about fame at all. People can pursue their passions and sacrifice other areas of their life and never become famous. We know the value of art goes up when an artist dies due to the limited supply of artwork, but it doesn't necessarily apply to actually being a starving artist. So let's talk about art as a profession today. I've talked about the various career paths being a visual arts management major can give you access to, but I have yet to delve into the money behind those careers. This section is still going to be an overview, but what I aim to do is clear up the general picture of being a professional artist and what it means to make money while doing it. So you can earn money through various means as an artist. But before we dive into what those means are, when we discuss money, I cannot express how important financial literacy is. Financial literacy is your ability to understand and effectively use financial skills like financial management, budgeting, and investing. In school, we are not taught how to do our taxes. We're not taught the risks that come with debt. We're not taught how credit works. We're not taught how to budget. If you have $1 million and do not understand, 1, the value of money, and 2, how to manage it all, you risk the loss of all of it in more ways than one. And this is true. No matter what job you are working, no matter how much money you make, being financially literate is so important. If you think I'm being dramatic, okay, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York reported in the second quarter of this year, household debt is currently $17.80 trillion. When you become a professional artist, your art becomes your business. Businesses are all about money. When you think about this outdated starving artist idea, it comes down to money. If you do not know how to manage your money, you might be living paycheck to paycheck. So if you're looking for a sign, this is it. Go and learn about financial literacy. Learn about budgeting, because those skills that you will learn will become tools to ensure that while you're selling your artwork and going on this endeavor of being a professional artist, you can ensure that you will at least be financially stable. Thank you for letting me preach about that. Now on to various streams of income. There are a lot of ways to look at being a professional artist. There is a more traditional route of taking commissions, applying for grants, putting up shows that sell the artwork, but there's also the aspect of social media now that could help you build an audience, build a brand, sell the art pieces, create prints, or any merchandise, knowing that you have an audience who will buy it. That can be a factor. For the more traditional artists, try looking up artist grants and then your state, or call to artists in your area to apply for shows when you can. Both the grants and the call for artists will give you the deadline date and tell you what you need to submit. Yes, sometimes you need to pay to apply for certain opportunities or even pay to be in the loop on opportunities. But as long as it's a reasonable price and you feel like it will benefit you in the long term, think of it as a business investment. And it could technically be a tax deduction, but I'm not going to get into that. In my last semester of college, in my capstone class, our textbook was called Getting Your Together by Karen Atkinson, or GYST, GIST. This book changed my perspective on art as a career. The reason I say this is because it taught me the business of being a self-employed professional artist and how to be realistic and knowledgeable about it. In the career section of the book, there was a really blunt quote that I want to read. Rarely do artists make a living exclusively from the sales of their work, even if they become fairly well-known artists. Many artists hold down a number of jobs in their life. The key is to find a job that allows you to keep making your work and that is satisfying or at least challenging. Many professional artists also moonlight as preparators, craftsmen, curators, professors, and graphic designers, to name a few. Some artists may pursue a career path that runs parallel to their art practice and take on such positions as engineers, construction workers, architects, and doctors. Even the GIST artists that contributed to this artist manual are editors, designers, and business entrepreneurs. Pursuing art doesn't necessarily mean dropping and sacrificing everything else to do so. If your art isn't paying the bills now, you can take up another job to assist with paying the bills while still focusing your free time on your artwork. When you're finding a job, there are different types of employment statuses, just for the record. Full-time, part-time, freelance/consulting work, temp work, and internships, which we have discussed before. So there's a lot of flexibility with how you can manage your time, work certain jobs, while also using as much time as you can to focus on your art. It is possible. Sure, it can sound like there is a lot of sacrifice in doing all this work, but pursuing your artwork to make a profit makes it a business, and you are investing time into that business, time into yourself. If you are passionate about your work, some sacrifice is needed. Sacrifices are needed in every decision we make. If you choose to give up selling your work or give up being a professional artist, you sacrifice the artwork itself. If your intention and passion is there, you will find yourself in amazing situations surrounded by artists and art lovers just like you, just as motivated and passionate as you. Of course, the goal in this situation is to be a full-time professional artist. Like I said, there's different types of professional artists. With art being a business, and technically if you're going to become a professional artist, you're self-employed at that point, GIST says there are 6 types of business professionals: being self-employed, an entrepreneur, an inventor, a franchise owner, a marketer, or a speculator. I will have to do more research on being a speculator, but there are a lot of ways to being a professional artist or being a business professional in general. But put your passions towards your art. It just depends on the route you take. Now, when it comes to social media, there are many ways to approach it, but no matter what platform you use, the goal is to get an audience. And it is very competitive out there, just to be realistic. You need supporters to back up your ventures online. I have a couple of social media examples from Instagram because that's my main form of entertainment. So my first example is at Demetra Milan on Instagram. She's an oil painter whose family owns the Milan Art Gallery here in Sarasota, Florida. In a reel, she shows making between $20,000 and $50,000 from selling her work in the first quarter of this year. As a viewer of her work, and also researching anything I could about Demetra for this episode, I can kind of gather her situation. So first, oil paint is much more expensive than acrylic paint and can increase the price of every single painting she creates. Second, her family owns the gallery that sells her work. Third, she teaches at an online art school. Fourth, she has 242,000 followers. If every person who follows her gave her $1, she would have $250,000 instantly. This is to put into perspective that when you have supporters, those people have the potential to become your collectors. Next, Demetra has income not just from selling her paintings. In her video, she says that more than half of the money she earned was sold in the gallery, but she also has a salary from teaching classes. She also takes commissions, and then there's the potential income from posting on social media. She frames her life as being a full-time professional artist, but even in her profession, she has various streams of income, all art-related. My next example is Richard K. Blade's art on Instagram. He kind of shows a different perspective of being on social media. He's based in Norfolk, UK. Richard is a contemporary painter. I wasn't able to find the specific article he wrote in October 2023 issue of Artists and Illustrators magazine called How I Make It Work, but by researching his work, I found an array of career paths. He was quoted as saying, "Becoming a full-time artist took a great deal of focus and hard work, and there have been many moments of uncertainty and doubt along the way. I used Instagram as a gauge of how I was doing as a painter, and thankfully received positive feedback. From there, I set up my website and began making sales. As with now, I had been teaching painting on the side, and this gave me that time and space to paint and develop my style." This is a really interesting quote because Richard makes a lot of good points about the self-doubt that can come from pursuing art as a career, having other work while he pursued becoming a professional artist, and utilizing social media to garner a platform and sell art. Now he sits at around 47.7 thousand followers on Instagram and is a represented artist and curator at the Point Contemporary, which is an artist-run gallery in Norfolk. Richard also has lectures that you can buy from the Penn Studio School of Art, which are his own workshop recordings, and he even has a podcast called Painting Insights Podcast. We can draw an educated conclusion that all of these career paths are indeed parallel to his professional art practice and also provide him multiple streams of income. So all in all, there are a lot of ways to look at art as a profession today and understand what you sign up for when you pursue a certain art path. This does not necessarily mean starving, but in actuality, it's about being realistic with your current options and the various art-related jobs you can look into. So don't lose hope. So we've expanded on being a starving artist, discussed a little bit of the misunderstood history behind it, and talked about your options when pursuing art as a career today. In part 2 of the Starving Artist Stupidity, we will discuss artistic values when it comes to money and success, modern challenges artists face, and providing you resources to help you feel more confident when becoming a creative professional. I hope that I have contributed and changed your mind about this idea and doubt that comes with being a professional artist. Well, that's all. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Museful, the art podcast, your art resource. Remember to check back next week for part 2 of the Starving Artist Stupidity. I also post on Wednesdays 3 times a month. Like, comment, subscribe. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in another video. Bye!